So I had a lot to say again, and here I am. I wanted to begin by focusing on something that is a huge problem in reconnecting with a toxic parent. They gotta stop thinking that they're not being heard, because you are. They gotta stop hearing that they're not heard when they say, we had to struggle too and we did the best we could with the tools we had. Of course you did. So Gen Z and even some of the millennial generation has said, hey, okay, you guys got us this far, but let's take it a step further. It's evolution. We saw that the screaming, the not apologizing, the avoiding your kids when they share their feelings, the hitting, we've seen the effects of that. You see it in science, where there's study after study saying that these methods create issues between parents and their children. I heard someone say that you don't traumatize your kids by occasional yelling, it's when you begin to use yelling as a parenting tool. It's when the yelling is repetitive and the child is left alone to self-soothe without being taught how to properly work through harsh emotions. That's what creates trauma, and the parent is no longer a safe space. The child stops feeling safe and the disconnect is born. The beginning of distrust, secrets, and space between them is now emerging. It's not easy, but it can be done. The relationship that Lorelai and Rory have is realistic. Say it's not because you haven't seen it up close and personal, or seen it end successfully. Fine, but it's realistic, in good ways and in bad. They are close the way they are because Lorelai listens to Rory. Lorelai gives Rory the space to feel the good and the ugly emotions in a safe space. She also gives Rory space when she needs it too. But also because of their closeness, I'd argue that there's a certain level of codependency between them. I was watching I Love a Mama's Boy, that reality show on TLC, and I won't say too much, but what I will say is that if Rory was a guy and in that show with Lorelai as a mom, oh my goodness. Anyways, let's get into these episodes.
Sierra loves TV. Yes, I made a theme song so that I can talk about all my favorite shows. Oh yeah.
And this is just your disclaimer that this is not me talking about any of the actors themselves, but more so their characters. Please do not attack me in the comments. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, even those who disagree with me. But let's keep it friendly. Alright, let's get started with the show. So right off the bat, we're starting off strong. Something to note is how whenever Lorelai's late, it's always a big issue, but then when Rory's late, Emily is so considerate. Like in this episode and the episode where Jess comes over for dinner, and when she goes golfing with Richard in season 1. Emily is holding Rory hostage and trying to force a night in like Lorelai and Rory's, all because why? Because Lorelai didn't come to dinner because she had to run errands for Rory. It would have been cool to see a scene where Emily looks over at the girls sleeping on the couch and smiles instead of Rory and Lorelai doing that, because it would shift the narrative of, oh, Emily actually does all this because she wants Lorelai to be around, but just doesn't know how to say it. But I just don't hear that that's what they were trying to say with the Lorelai and Emily dynamic. In episode 3, Emily's extending her abuse to Rory this season. Remember guys, Rory to Emily is the good one. She's the Lorelai do-over, and she's always looked at as an angel, according to Richard and Emily. So with that being said, the following events make absolutely no sense. Instead of calling Rory and asking if she really needed or wanted new furniture, she just moved whatever furniture she thought was best right in. And she just let everyone know that not only is she manipulative, she knows that she is. She's openly acknowledging that she is, and she's encouraging her granddaughter to be manipulative. She's viewing buying the furniture as a ploy to get everyone else to view her as being on top, basically. She wants Rory to use the furniture being hers as a way to control her roommates. Thank God that Rory refuses. But there'll be a boatload of people saying that this is helpful. There will be people saying that anyone not delighted by Emily doing this is crazy, and that they themselves would be over the moon if they had a grandma who did things like this. But it's not about the gift. It's about the fact that Emily does not trust Lorelai or Rory to make their own judgment about their lives. She doesn't respect them enough to call them and see where their comfort level is at. Because if she truly thought they were going to be okay with all the stuff she did, and she thought it was all so helpful and that they would love it, what would be the harm in calling and making sure that everything is okay? Like, what would be the harm in that one step? She feels entitled to do what she pleases because this is an investment. She feels everything she does invest into the Gilmore name, and she's going to protect it with her life. Possibly because of the harsh criticism she'd received from Gran or her society, but nonetheless, she's overstepping, and she's just not going to get a pass from me on that. It's our jobs as people to evolve and aspire to be better people. It's not an easy road, but it's one we all have to walk if we hope for a better future. That future is choosing to be kind and choosing to respect others, and especially yourself, by not allowing toxic energy to drain you. And I feel like that's why the best thing a lot of the time is to go no contact. Rory states her concern, and Emily reinforces the idea that the furniture is a power move and she should be happy about it. Later, Rory and Lorelai have a conversation conversation where Rory tells Lorelai how she still feels unsure about the furniture still being there, and Lorelai reminds Emily of how quickly Emily internalizes a boundary as a sign of disrespect and then turns to manipulation. But Lorelai reminds Rory that her saying that wasn't an attempt to encourage Rory to take abuse. She urges her to say something. She tries to mentally prepare Rory for the reality of that conversation. I feel like that's parenting. It must be really difficult to try and prevent kids from experiencing negative interactions. I think there's something to observe in the conversation Richard and Emily have later at the Gilmores. They discuss how Jason Stiles has called the son of his former boss to come over and speak with him. Most people without context would see that as an innocent meeting. The Gilmores know that in their world, it's a power move. Because why? Because Emily, Richard, Trix, Jason, Christopher, and even my girl Lorelai understand hidden agenda. The Gilmores understand how to use it. They understand that there's manipulation in their world. If that's not the writers helping confirm that with this scene, I don't know what'll convince people that Emily is very calculated and not in a good way. God, being an overthinker really took the cake on this one. Then, right after Richard announces that he doesn't want to talk to Jason, she just tells Richard that she's already went behind his back and invited Jason without talking to Richard first. She manipulates everyone. No one is exempt. I don't know if that makes the situation better or worse. And then look at the anxiety that Rory has when she wants to talk to Emily about the furniture. I just think that's ridiculous. Like, I don't think anyone should have that much anxiety talking to another person. In episode 5, instead of trying to connect with Lorelai, Emily badgers Lorelai about why she didn't tell her that Suki was pregnant, like it was her duty to know. And once again, it's about how she looks to the outside world. Okay, I'm done. Instead of just checking in with Rory while she's talking about the date that she's about to go on, Emily is prying with a million questions without hesitation. It was like Paris was sitting there. Like Paris talking to that kid she always bullies, Brad. Then hearing Emily mention Sex and the City was like, oh my God. I wonder if she watched it and thought that Bunny Dougal was actually a marvelous character and a loving, devoted mother. Jesus. And she's back to blaming Lorelai for everything when Lorelai wasn't even there. Lorelai didn't even know about the boy until she did. I totally understood where Lorelai was coming from, and if you haven't ever had a bad relationship with your parents to the point of not speaking to them, I feel like it's gonna be really hard for you to understand that. Which is fine because, thank God you haven't. Thank God you have not had that experience and that you don't understand because it sucks. But at the same time, if you haven't, you're probably thinking like Suki and you're like, it's not that big of a deal. Why does she have to block Emily out of her private life? Information in the hands of a manipulator or an abuser is very, very dangerous because any information from what you did today could be a weapon for them, which is exactly what Lorelai said. Lorelai has a habit of never feeling safe from or with her parents. She's never truly relaxed around them, which I've pointed out before in previous videos. And Lorelai was right. Not only did the designer speak with Emily coinkadinkly, she told Emily that she'd made Lorelai certain promises. All that Lorelai really wanted was for Natalie not to tell her mother her business about her finances and her personal life. Because as we've seen in the past, whenever Emily's involved in her personal life, she tries to take over. Like she couldn't even talk to Rory. Like I said before, she couldn't even talk to Rory about the date without trying to find out some kind of way. Like it was just too much. She was prying way too much. She was putting way too much pressure. In episode 6, Emily tells Lorelai a fake story about another company to try and emphasize to Lorelai that without her, she's nothing. That Lorelai needs her help. She's trying to shame Lorelai for not telling her about the company, but why would Lorelai tell her? That's what we need to be thinking about. Why would Lorelai tell her? Give us a reason. Pink. Let's talk about what I feel like Jason represents. Jason Stiles to me represents competition for Emily. Notice that Emily only has issues with those that don't fall in line with what she wants. She maintains a good relationship with Rory as long as she nods along and allows her to overstep. She has an issue with Jason because Jason represents change. Jason changes the way that Richard does business. He introduces Richard to the internet. It's the same reason that we see her have issues with Penelon Lott. Penelon Lott, Jason, Lorelai, these are all people that Emily cannot control. And when she can't control people, she shuts them out and avoids them, as she does with Penelon Lott in episode 9. Something that I feel like we all need to focus on in this episode is why would Lorelai believe that Emily did all this to humiliate her for nothing? Why would she believe that? Why is that where her mind goes? Like, what is the reason? What has happened to make her think that way automatically? Look how confused Lorelai is by Emily actually admitting that what she did was wrong in the scene where Emily comes to her house. I actually felt for Emily when her party got canceled because I think that's her whole world, and I can respect that. Emily needs things that she can count on, and I think that she's overwhelmed by change. I can see that, but something to also understand is that just because this is her issue in life, it shouldn't be made out to be everyone's anyone's issue. If you've ever been to therapy at some point, you learned that a harsh truth in healing from trauma is that while it wasn't your choice to be traumatized, it is your responsibility to heal from it, especially when it's causing you and your meaningful relationships to suffer. And in this case, Emily cannot form a real connection with her daughter until she addresses her own trauma. Take Sheila from Shameless, for example. Sheila experiences agoraphobia, which is essentially the fear of being outside, which seems to stem from a lack of control, similar to Emily. Not the agoraphobia, the fear of not having control. If Sheila was to pretend that her phobias weren't real and refuse to take accountability for how it affects her relationship with her daughter, that would have a much bigger impact on their relationship. And the opposite of that accountability looks like a relationship like Lorelai and Emily. Until Emily confronts her issues, they cannot move forward. And that is with minimal research when I say that, by the way. That's how I view that dynamic, whether it's Lorelai and Emily or anybody else. I think that it is the parent's job to model good behavior. And Emily has a habit of not being able to get her way and shutting people out. Lorelai goes to confront Jason about how he hurt Emily's feelings, and once they get it cleared up, she agrees to go on a date with him. In episode 9, in this episode, the last episode we'll be discussing today, Lorelai wants to go to a game at Rory's college, and a secret about Richard finally comes out. This was one of those episodes where Emily was at her worst. First, they show up to the Yo game and they say things like, "Well, Rory looks so perfect. Why can't you be more like Rory?" They treat Rory like she's Lorelai's sister. And let's talk about the beef with Penel and Lot. What is Emily's beef with Penel and Lot? That she almost married Richard? Why not just accept the win and move on? Why completely avoid her unless you feel like Richard is still seeing her, or unless you just don't trust Richard, which is a reflection of your relationship. So I really don't get the beef with Penel and Lot. Like, I don't understand why it's like forbidden to talk to her. Without more backstory, Emily's reaction before Lorelai runs into Penel and Lot again just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Do you guys think Emily already knew about Penel and Lot, or was she acting that way without cause and being immature? After Lorelai runs into Penel and Lot again, and when Penelin mentions knowing something about Lorelai's personal life, it becomes clear to Emily that Penelin might be a little more active in their lives than she was aware of. What does Emily do first? Instead of confronting Richard head on, she takes her anger out on her maid, all because she put Rory's Fig Newtons on a plate instead of a doily, which I don't really get why she would do that when they were like outside. Anyway, she was looking for a scapegoat, which is where Lorelai came in. Lorelai offers to help Emily because she can sense that she's frustrated. She asks Emily if she's okay. Emily says she's fine. Then when Richard shows up, she confronts him about how Penelin knows their business. Richard admits that he's been getting together with Penelin once a year since they got married, which was 39 years ago from that conversation. And of course, because Lorelai keeps trying to comfort her, Emily turns on her too. She blames Lorelai for her knowing about the lunch. She then tells Lorelai over and over that she wasn't supposed to come to her own daughter's college game. If I was Lorelai, I would have went on that date too, just to irritate her. When dealing with someone like that, you gotta take your wins where you can get them. So let's end it here with the happiness of a Lorelai win, because that's what I like to see. Being the scapegoat for someone who isn't self-aware is so frustrating, because you can clearly tell that their anger isn't about you, and yet you're stuck in a tongue battle because regardless of what you know in your mind, it's like you still feel attacked, and it pushes you into fight or flight mode, inducing another reaction. The other thing is that being self-aware doesn't always mean that you're not going to respond to triggers. It might mean with a lot of practice that your response becomes less and less emotional, but I'm learning that that'll take time. I don't hear people talk about how disappointing it can be for you to walk into a situation aiming to not let toxic energy get to you after trying to be less and less reactive and resorting to old methods even though you know they don't work. I saw a quote that said something like, "You can't get too mad at yourself for occasionally slipping back into your old habits when you're triggered. It's comparable to being on fire and getting mad at yourself for screaming." It is hard to change. It is really hard to change. And to those of you who are also trying to form healthy habits, I see you, and I'm wishing you the best on the bumpy road to healing. Till next time, little doves.